Hey guys, Buff Gaming back today, bringing you another video, and today we're going to go over the Modern Warfare weapons versus the Cold War weapons, mainly when it comes to recoil and then also damage a little bit here. But you can see in the background, I'm test firing different Modern Warfare weapons versus the Krig here from Cold War. So you'll see the M16 kitted out for max recoil, the M13 kitted out versus the Krig 6, which is the Cold War weapon. And I picked this thing up recently and put it back in my rotation for solos, buyback, just to see how much more dominant it was. So you can see, testing the recoil patterns here against the wall, the Krig has a straight vertical recoil, versus here's the M16 kitted out, or the M4 kitted out as best we can for recoil. You can see the huge discrepancy there. And then here we have the M13, which the M13 does pretty good with recoil. However, you can see it actually goes up and to the right pretty heavily, and then obviously the M4 does it even worse. And you can see the Krig is just half that recoil. Now here's the Kilo. Again, the Kilo obviously has very low recoil and is easy to control. But one thing to note is that goes up and to the left. The other ones go up and to the right. The Krig goes straight vertically, and here you'll see the gameplay just using the Krig. Pretty easy game. Just watch the gameplay as we talk through this. But you can see, obviously, the Kilo has a very little amount of recoil. However, the Modern Warfare weapons versus the Cold War weapons, specifically here we're looking at the Krig 6. You can put the FAR and some of the other weapons in there. A lot of the Cold War weapons just really don't have recoil. And the one thing I noticed is it's not only they don't have recoil, they just don't have horizontal recoil. So it's very straight vertical recoil there you saw with the Krig. No horizontal bouncing. But the other thing mainly is that the recoil itself is not heavily vertical, but there's also no visual recoil. The Modern Warfare weapons here, the ones that we tested, have a visual recoil, which may cause you to compensate, but you can see there's always a subtle bounce in the weapon. Even the M13 has a bounce when you're shooting it at different ranges. And here with the Krig, you'll see I just feel so confident using this thing, because not only do I have a clean 3x optic here, which is just so easy to use, I have 60 rounds of ammunition with the 5.56, and the weapon itself just does not have recoil, so I can easily just spam fire this thing. It does pretty heavy damage. I would say definitely more so than the M4 and probably any of the Modern Warfare weapons. I'm not going to look at the damage numbers. You can check out Exclusive Ace or maybe even True Game Data, Drifter, those guys like J-God also for that information. I'm just looking at this from an in-game perspective, playing with the weapons and just what I'm noticing since obviously starting Warzone when it first came out on day one. Not only as a content creator, but as a fan of the game itself. The Krig, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I had a lot of fun using this weapon in Warzone. I think it really made it more of an enjoyable experience for me. Previously here, I was using an AK-103 build that I had from the Modern Warfare AK, which I was having fun with that. However, you're looking at low kill games, because a lot of firefights, you're just not winning those unless you have the upper edge on the opponent. Here with the Krig, you'll see some of these engagements in the background. This one specifically is an engagement. I would never even try this with a Modern Warfare weapon, and the fact that I even broke that guy, I was shocked, and I figured out, okay, I'll keep shooting at him, and I actually got the kill at that range, which is just insane. You would never get that with a Modern Warfare weapon, so I'm not really sure. I know they just buffed the recoil, or they, I guess, nerfed the recoil, so a lot of the Cold War weapons have different attachments that stack with the different barrels, the agency suppressor, the different grips, all impact the recoil control. So you can really stack these attachments to make just basically a laser beam, especially something if we look at the Krig. Not only can I have it kitted out for no recoil here, but the mobility on it is very, very good compared to something like the M4 that we showed, the Kilo, or even the M13. Now the M13 is probably my all-around favorite weapon. I have a lot of fun using that. It's been a weapon I've always gone back to and just always enjoyed, because it is a low recoil gun, but the damage is not heavy. I believe it's about a 7 milliseconds PTK on that thing. So it acts how, in my mind at least, a 5.56 weapon should with low recoil. So it has low recoil. However, you need to consistently hit shots and obviously keep your aim on target in order to get that kill. That way your opponent has time to react. And now if we look at in contrast here, the Krig, you can see my mobility is extremely fast. I'm moving almost as if I have like an MP5 or something. I'm moving like I have an SMG. But again, just the fact that there's no horizontal recoil, the vertical recoil is very, very low like we showed in the beginning of the video, and there's no visual recoil either. So really, you're just battling that slight vertical muzzle climb. No visual recoil, no bounce or anything like that. You can see these close quarters with a 3x optic. is just something you really wouldn't be doing with a Modern Warfare weapon. At least I wouldn't be doing with a Modern Warfare weapon, especially those longer range engagements. You'll see some more coming up here. I would have a lot of trouble with some of these engagements, and like I said, I wouldn't really try these engagements with something like a Kilo, an M13, AMAX, things like that. I think the fact that these Cold War weapons just had these additional attachments stacked, so hopefully this is something they can kind of rein in on this and get this under control sooner rather than later. I know, obviously, Battlefield's coming up. A lot of players are probably going to be jumping to that, but Warzone's something that's going to be around forever. There's going to definitely be, once Modern Warfare 2 comes out, a second iteration of Warzone. And I'm sure they'll make a lot of improvements and learn from what they did here in this Warzone. But definitely recoil weapon balance is just a huge thing that I think has really, unfortunately, plagued the game for its entire life cycle. And I can be pretty critical about that over on Twitter if you follow me there. But I try to give them the fair shake. They have a lot of weapons to balance here. But it's definitely, I don't think, in a good state at all right now. The way the Cold War weapons just are overshadowing the Modern Warfare weapons. At this point, really, there's no reason to use any Modern Warfare weapon compared to the Cold War weapons. And again, I'm using the Krig 6 here, so I'm not even using the FARA, which is by far much, much better. We saw the Emily that was released here in the beginning of the season have no recoil. Luckily, they patched that, but it's still, when you have that thing kitted out, the Emily has very low recoil as well. So this isn't something that's just an issue with now that the Cold War integration has come out. This has obviously been something that's plagued the game ever since Warzone started, and Infinity Ward was handling it. Weapons like the Grau and obviously the AMAX, things like that, the Kilo, things like that always had issues. Now the Kilo really, I always thought was in a pretty good spot. Everything just got nerfed down to the point that the Kilo was the best weapon. So I remember early in Warzone, I had a lot of fun using the Kilo, but it was still, you didn't stand a chance versus an M4. Anything like that. Some of the new weapons that came out, like the AMAX, you really didn't stand a chance. And once those weapons, some of the other weapons, like the 5.56 rifles, got nerfed, and the Bruin especially, the Bruin was a big problem. But once all those weapons got nerfed, the Kilo kind of took the forefront as the meta weapon, and it really was never that amazing. No one ever used it till everything got nerfed down. So it seems like this has really, unfortunately, just been a problem since the beginning of Warzone, with new weapons or just 5.56 weapons in general not having recoil. I know the new weapon also being the C58, the other new weapon introduced with Season 4, which is basically the G3, also is a 7.62 weapon that has no recoil when you stack that thing as well. So if you compare that to something like the Scar H, they both fire the same caliber, that being the 7.62 by 51 NATO. However, the Scar, again, same comparison we looked at here, Krig versus all the 5.56 weapons. The Scar has much more vertical and horizontal recoil, as well as visual recoil and bounce, versus something like the C58, which, again, Cold War weapon firing the exact same caliber. And in real life, when we looked at those weapons and compared them, the Scar really does not have heavy recoil in real life. When you're firing that thing full auto, the recoil is not anything crazy. It's a very stable weapon, a very lightweight weapon. So it just is unfortunate that they really don't compare them to the real life counterparts and at least have some sort of contrast to their real life versions of themselves. So the Scar in game versus the G3, the Scar would be a much better weapon, at least when we're looking at their recoil control, things like that, much more modular. But in game, the C58 is unfortunately just a laser beam, and I know that's ground loot right now. So is the Emily. So these new weapons get introduced, and it's just very hard to get away from them. And then you have this new meta that's introduced every season. So I'd really like to see, I know Raven's planning on decreasing the TTK by about a millisecond to a millisecond and a half for all weapons across the board. So I think that would be a really good thing. It would really allow more gun skill and better engagement, so you're not just dying instantly. You can see these engagements with the Krig. Again, I'm at very long ranges, no recoil, just killing these people so easily. It was really effortless. It was fun, but it was very effortless, which is really why I don't tend to use Cold War weapons, just because after these recent patches that they've done, after they started really adjusting these weapons, they've become very, very overpowered. But, I mean, that's really been the case kind of on and off since Cold War integration. If we look back to the DMR-14, things like that, Cold War weapons, I think, just caused a big issue. I think these weren't, obviously, clearly weapons weren't tested. They weren't planned out as much as they should have. I think, obviously, they were on a release deadline. They had to rush things in and get it in there. And then we're basically kind of in the test environment right now as they play around the weapons and see where everything should be. So hopefully, This is something they can get on top of going forward. Hopefully, with the second iteration of Warzone, whenever that comes out, most likely around the time Modern Warfare 2 comes out, we'll have a lot of this stuff balanced out. I'm really looking forward to see how this game does when Battlefield releases, to see what kind of things they release when Battlefield releases. That would be pretty interesting to see how they react and what they balance, what they release, what they don't release, things like that. And you can see here, this guy kills me with a FARA, or he kills me, but he has a FARA. So that's the other weapon that we didn't even touch on, which, again, very overpowered. So let me know down below what you guys think. What do you think? Are they phasing out the Modern Warfare weapons for the Cold War weapons? You can see here, here's the Krig that I was using here in the gameplay. We have the Agency Suppressor, the 19.7-inch Ranger, 3x Axial Arms. We have the 60-round Fast Mag and a Field Agent Grip versus, again, like some of those 5x6 weapons that we were showing, being my M13. Here you can see the attachments. Very standard M13. We also had the M4. Again, this is an ugly build, but it's really max recoil build. And then also, we had the Kilo one for one of the 433. Again, I just had the VLK on it instead of this, but you can see. So, obviously, it seems like they're really taking Cold War weapons in the forefront, really overshadowing the Modern Warfare weapons. Let me know down below what you guys think, what kind of changes you want to see. Till next time, this is Buffering Gaming, out.